Hello, hello. How's everyone doing today? Just make sure my background is there we go. We'll just blur it. Sweet, yeah. All right, let's dive into it. I'm your host, Elon. Again, just coming at you with another episode. This is another live stream. Let's see here.
What's up? What's up?
How's it going, Matthew?
How you doing today?
Welcome. Pretty good, dude. How are you doing?
Great. Yeah. Glad to be on with you today.
Thank you, sir. I was just about to do the giveaway.
Oh, awesome.
Share my screen. So we're doing this $500 Airbnb gift card giveaway. It was a promotion sponsored by Guide CX. And so this one was only open to new Guide CX users, or not new Guide CX users, but new community members that use Guide CX, if that makes sense. So can you see my screen? Am I sharing my screen? I am. Okay.
Yep.
I feel like this is the first time I've ever used Zoom. Every day is like a brand new day. Let's do this. All right. Okay. Got my CSV updated. Timo Craig is our lucky Airbnb winner. I'll reach out to you. And yeah, congrats, man.
Woo! Congratulations. Hope you have a great stay.
I know. Make sure you treat yourself. Sweet, man. Okay. And then yeah, I just wanted to go over a couple of let's see. Just a couple of news. So August, we're all done with August. Can you believe that today's the last day? That is wild, dude. We had this goal to hit 500 community members by the end of August. We're at 349, which I am not disappointed at all because one thing I've learned along the way building this community is it would be really easy to get 500 people. If we email blasted everyone and just had very impersonal invites, and yeah, just the quality of the members that have joined so far has been outstanding.
Mhm.
So, and yeah, if you just go through any of these onboarding discussions, you're gonna see right away like there are some quality answers, and it's not just like about numbers for me. Community, I want to make sure that we're all engaging, and we're off to a good start. We've got 349 people who love onboarding,
Hey.
and they definitely contribute. They have a lot of experience. They have a lot of they've been around the block. So collectively, I think we're going to be able to really blow this thing up, and we're going to turn this community into the place that's where you go to level up. Right. So yeah, just those are the main updates. Stay tuned on the events page. This is where you can go. If you're a customer, you can go check out our master classes hosted by Kimberly. She's our amazing training guide. This is where we post all of our live streams. We actually have a really cool webinar coming up. It's Tuesday, September 26th. It's we're Guide CX is doing this webinar with Forrester. For those of you who don't know, they're kind of the business gurus. Like that's anything they say, that's where you wanna listen to them. So we're gonna have a sweet webinar with them and talk about customer onboarding. So but yeah, anything else I'm missing?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, yeah, let's go ahead and dive into today's question of the week. And also welcome, Nicole. Feel free to chime in at any point if there's something you're like, hey, I've got some challenges, I've got some questions, I've got some experiences to share. Please don't be a stranger.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm excited to be.
Yeah, we like to call this a safe space for onboarding managers.
Thank you. This is my first one, so I'm excited.
Very good, very good. Awesome.
Where are you calling in from? Where are you located?
I'm in Tennessee.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, that's fun. I've only been there once, so I can't really comment too much about it. It was like a drive-through.
Yeah, I was about to say probably no specific place, just coming through.
If we were to visit Tennessee, what would you recommend that Matthew and I do while we're out there?
Oh man. Well, it depends on the kind of vibe you want, because Nashville is like a hot spot in Tennessee. People love to go to Nashville. They like to kind of have the music scene, go to concerts. I do tend to like that, but I'm also a Vols fan because I'm near Knoxville. So I think that the like vibe at a Vols game is unmatched. So I'm kind of always gonna say that. But you also have Gatlinburg, Dollywood, Dolly Parton. You really can't beat her. So like I might also just say like go to a Vols game and then go to Dollywood or Pigeon Forge while you're there and have some fun because they're kind of side by side.
Very cool.
Start
See, there's
booking
an
our
opportunity there
trip.
for sure. Yeah, I guess we should start booking our tickets, Elon.
I think you should.
I do honestly, part of building the community, I do want to kind of like joking off of what Matthew said. But in all seriousness, in mixed signals. I do want us to start like connecting with people in person now that like that's becoming more of a norm.
Mhm.
I think we should continue doing virtual meetups. But I do really want to start jumping into more of a like, hey, we're like, for example, in October, I'll be in Boston. I'm looking to connect with everyone in the community and I'll bring
Oh,
some
very
swag
cool.
or something. So yeah, I think it'd be fun for people to get together in person.
Yeah, maybe we'll do some sort of conference in like Honolulu or something.
That'd be awesome.
Ah.
I think
Yeah, all
that one.
expenses paid.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Sweet. If only I could get the budget.
One thing at a time. Awesome.
Hey, sweet. Yeah, let's check out the question of the week. Without further ado, what are effective change management strategies in onboarding? We got a couple of responses from Kay Sangiorgi. So sorry if I mispronounced that. And Jake Messer. So I don't know if you guys have had time to read over this, but the overall takeaway is identify your champion, gamify it, but also really change happens from within. I don't mean to get so meta there, but as an onboarder, there's only so much we can say to someone to help them affect change in their organization, right? Like Jake put here, it's also about the client communicating their why effectively within the company. And sometimes a project champion has the end vision in their head and they act in ways consistent with the vision. However, they're shocked that no one else is following their lead. So I can't tell you how many times that's happened to me where I feel like me and the person I'm working with, I like to call him program manager, we're working side by side, we're connected at the hip and everything's going well, we're getting implemented. They seem like a champion, but then I hand them off to customer success and we see usage rates just plummet, or just people don't adopt it as easily as I thought it was, like as well as I thought it was going,
Definitely.
So Matthew, Nicole, how do we empower our clients to be the champion, help them affect that change?
Yeah. I mean, this is something that's been, again, this being my like sixth startup I've worked for. It's like you start to realize that it's so much more than just implementing or configuration or setup or training. It's really how do you get them rocking and rolling. And I feel like that's one of those items where you really are facilitating some pretty significant change management, especially if the tool is like assisting or helping or even replacing a formerly used software solution. I've noticed that there can be moments too where you might have some naysayers within the organization as far as kind of like pushing back to like, oh, I liked how we did it before. Why are we changing to this new system? And so I think it's important to have an open and honest conversation. Maybe even work with your champion to say, hey, let's gather some of that feedback, some of those points that they have. But ultimately, it's like a careful balancing act where it's not like it becomes very like confrontational or like a debate. It's more or less you guys have purchased this solution, and this is how we're going to not only deliver on the value that we promised initially, but this is how it's going to significantly make your day, your lives easier or better. But yeah, that's the part that I think will continue to blow any onboarding manager away is you'll have clients who literally spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on something, get it set up, and then don't touch it. Like, I don't know how that happens or how that works out, but I think that's one of those elements where it's like, how can you become part of that day-to-day experience with your clients? And even I think one item that I continue to think about as I consider what were really good onboardings versus ones that were a little bit more of a struggle was securing time and protecting time. So if your solution has any sort of reporting dashboard, weekly or daily usage, maybe that could be an element of part of your training. Is like, hey guys, as a part of your first 30 days, let's create like a standing, like every day, like half an hour carved out on your calendar to help really integrate and get used to using the tool that we just implemented and, spent 2 to 3 months setting up with you guys. So I realized that like, though the team might be excited, they might be really want to use it. I think they first have to not only commit, but also have to be available to use that tool. So I think that could be an opportunity to work with those that maybe are the power users or end users of the software solution to actually consciously set up like either once a week or daily, like, hey, let's just carve out a half an hour every day or a couple times a week and have that be a standing sort of time for people to get into the system and continue to use the software. So I realize excitement, commitment, all those things are great, but if availability isn't there, then that's something that we can hopefully help to manage and set that expectation and help navigate our client as they have that conversation with their own team.
I love that thought. I'm kind of immediately, I go into that too, where I'm always trying to kind of encourage the administrator to think about the end user while they're configuring and while we're working through processes. I'm like, okay, so you have to remember, just because you want it this way, we want to get this end report, but we also want to make sure that your end users will use this every single day and we're not increasing clicks. We have to make this more, more time, really time saving, because then I'll have people come back and they're like, it's easier to enter it on a spreadsheet. Well, yeah, yep. You're not going to get the reports you want, but it is easier. And so just kind of really trying to remember the why. But I also have those users when I can encourage them to get in it more. They're like, oh yeah, this is becoming easier every time I do it. So I like your thought of just saying, can you carve out 30 minutes to play in here? Just remembering they're busy. I feel like a lot of us are working, maybe in nonprofit spaces or things like that, where folks are juggling, a lot of things and wearing a lot of hats. So trying to keep that front and center and prove why it's important to implement this and how it's going to help them in their mission and in their day-to-day work. So I think I'm struggling with this currently. It's something we talk about all the time on my team, and how we really drive change management specifically with end users, because typically the administrators aren't the problem if they purchased it. It's the adoption and after.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's one of those things where you want to have that conversation early and often. And I think that's a tendency we're starting to see even within software development, where you're trying to engage your customer as soon as early in that process of building some solution for them, so that you don't spend months and months and months configuring, setting something up. And then you realize for the end user, the person you're building it for, they're like, we never asked for this. This is what we wanted. So I feel like that could also be an element of like checking in with end users and getting them prepped and ready. But yeah, really catching that vision and helping to socialize that out. One side that I saw for some clients that were really helpful is they actually had change management PDFs or one-pagers, because they were going to like implement this new it was like a hardware plus software solution, and it was for monitoring and managing, I think, utility like water and electricity at power plants. And so they had an element where they would ship, these new things that would need to be installed at those at those sites. And then they also had a software solution that those property or facility managers could download on their phone and then get real-time information about how efficient their facility is running. And what was really helpful is that they would set up and send out one pagers to their main points of contact there, and they could print them out, put them out in the break rooms and the meeting areas and say, hey, we're introducing this new tool, and there's some elements here that you guys might want to know or how it's going to impact your day. So really understanding what that end experience is going to be. Like, it's the difference between like going to an amusement park and there's nobody there to help you versus like somebody guiding and directing and even advertising kind of like how to use it or why you should be excited about something. I feel like that goes a long way just to kind of meet the end user where they are, especially if the solution you're providing them is going to save them time in the long run. Like you had mentioned before, they might be more familiar with spreadsheets and stuff like that, but really you're trying to paint them and get them to the promised land of like, hey, but it can be so much better. It can be so much more effective or useful or whatever it might be. And really guiding them through that first 30 days or 60 days of adoption, just because, yeah, you will have people that might just want to revert or cut back to the old ways. So yeah, I would say definitely engage them early and often, especially if the solution is going to be benefiting those people that you're really trying to get to use your software.
Yeah, two really good takeaways. Engage the customer, the end user sooner, and providing some sort of asset or giving that champion another arrow to his quiver or quiver. Yeah, I've seen this motion within customer success where CSMs are struggling right now because they're not in the meetings with CFOs. So the move to address that is they're creating all these assets, these slide decks, these one pagers, these videos for their champion. So the champion can go to the CFO of their organization and really go up to bat. So I think that translates well within onboarding. We should be creating assets for the customer champion so they can make that change effective within the org. And another thought that came to mind was, yeah, essentially like change management. What is it in a nutshell? It's breaking a habit. It's helping someone form a new habit. And it's, yeah, if we're like how do we help customers break their internal habits? Like that's, I think as soon as someone cracks this code, they're going to be a trillionaire. But I'll take a stab at it. Feel free to write me a check. But yeah, in essence, I feel like breaking the habit. Let's say I have a nasty habit of biting my nails a lot or something. How do I like? It's not enough to just have someone tell me one time, hey, you gotta stop biting your nails. Like, and then if I forget about it, it needs to be at the front of my mind all the time. Okay, this might be TMI, but when I was a kid, I did bite my nails a lot. And my parents told me to stop. They said, hey, that's not good for your nails. It's not good for your teeth. Like, you gotta stop biting.
Mhm.
And so what they did to help fix that was, and I was like 5 or 6 at the time. The story is slowly going downhill. But to keep it at the forefront of my mind, my dad had the idea of dipping my fingers in hot sauce. And so
Yo.
anytime I would put my finger in my mouth, it would burn. And so he created like this negative, like opposite of Pavlov's dog. So, whatever that study was.
Mhm.
But that helped me break that habit. And it wasn't a one-time thing like, oh, gross, hot sauce.
Mhm.
It was consistent. It happened multiple times. And then I finally learned my lesson. Okay, I need to adopt this new behavior because when I don't, there's a negative consequence. So is there a way we can emulate that within onboarding and helping the end user make that change especially for the stubborn people in the org
Mhm.
who don't like change?
Yeah. I don't know, maybe Nicole, have you had an example of where you were able to overcome that, or maybe a scenario we could talk through on this call of maybe a current challenge you're facing? Of course, we'll use like not real people's names and stuff like that.
Honestly, I think that's a really good call out. I myself am a nail biter still, so clearly my parents did not use hot sauce.
Or maybe you
Um,
like hot sauce. So it didn't
I'm thinking I should try it as an adult.
Yeah.
Um, gosh, I don't know. I feel like I was literally just in a meeting. We were talking about processes, and it's something we're seeing. And so I feel like I have many scenarios right now, if we're being honest, but we have an approach where we really try to empower our kind of champions and administrators to be able to make changes and navigate the software themselves, so they're really able to get in here and kind of really be the expert is our hope. So that's where we spend a lot of our focus. And so we focus less on the end users, hoping, that our champion or administrator will do the training. So I think, to me personally, that's our failure. Like, that's where we're really losing momentum. So I have tried to create kind of simplistic videos. I'm like, I've spent so much time with them in onboarding. I know what they're using the system for, how we've set it up. Let me make a quick video they can share with their end users. It takes me all of 5 to 10 minutes to do it, and it's very, very helpful to them. Same thing with creating those assets. I've been using, the tool of documenting their process and just sending it to them to make it easier for them. But I still, the ones that are successful are the ones that are really bought in. So I don't really know how to emulate that. And I think that's what we're struggling with, is how to get everyone bought in. Because that's hard for me to create, other than creating something that they just can't live without. And I feel like sometimes that's hard. So my scenario does tend to be more towards like that end user versus administrator or like champion training.
Yeah, maybe there's something even like deeper in that, because I would imagine what we're trying to institute, which is like change management, training, engagement, all these sort of things are not like getting a lot of people to do something is not a new problem for humanity, right? And it could be like filling out taxes in a certain way. It could be recycling in a certain manner or something like that. So I feel like these are things that we've encountered, as a species, if you will, for doing massive changes. But I'm wondering if there's maybe a social element that we could lean into that could be more engaging for those end users potentially. And I think one avenue that could be like that is like even Guide CX, like with this new community that we have here as well, is like, is there an opportunity where maybe you have cohorts of end users that go through, like make the process like so seamless that it's an opportunity for them to maybe meet each other's like counterparts in different organizations and socialize and kind of build up that conversation, so that when people do engage, they're buying into more of like a community of members versus just like disparate, like sort of like, oh, I'm just one guy and this solution and software was given to me, so I have to learn it, versus like, oh, now because we have this software, I'm now part of a larger conversation, a larger community. And I feel like maybe that would help drive sort of that social element, because I think the straight up reason why we don't do personalized training a lot of times for end users is it just takes too much time and it's too resource intensive. So by having community members kind of be able to speak and help each other, I think that can be really, really helpful and create more of a organic movement within the organization. The only downside and risk, I think, is if your software doesn't deliver, or if there's a lot of people that are like not happy with it, then it could be kind of like a snowball effect. So I guess it's kind of like both, and I guess you get this sort of social movement. Because one thing that I thought was really exciting that we're doing here at Guide CX are like master classes every so often, and maybe even start to standardize those as like a Tuesday, Thursday sort of deal, whatever it might be. But the nice thing about it is like for our contributors, so what would be equivalent to Nicole's end users, they have a very set amount of activity. They have a very set amount of like capabilities that they can do within the application. Again, the admins and the power users and sort of those level licenses at each of our organizations, I feel like they do get the necessary training they need, like the customer champion training, the trainer sort of training. But as far as the end users who could number in the, 20s, 30s, hundreds of people, depending on the size of the client, I feel like having those master classes that anybody could drop in and to attend, and it just basically goes over all of the capabilities that those lower license levels could do. So I feel like that could be a really cool way for somebody like on our side, or even within Nicole's organization, say, hey, I'm one of the trainers here. Maybe there's a group of different trainers here every Tuesday, every week. Any net new client who wants to kind of share the software experience with those that are just end users, just have them attend this drop-in class, and they'll be with other people who are also using the software much in the same ways that they're doing. And again, it's just kind of like, how do you get familiar with it versus, the admins, the PMs, that sort of training, the more intense, maybe that's where you can make more of those strategic investments to set up individual training sessions. But I thought that was a really novel solution that Elon and Kimberly came up with, is just having these open sort of office hours that were consistent, repeatable, and that anybody from any organization could drop in and attend, knowing that there's a certain level of like kind of ability that they could do. So really kind of breaking those sessions out by license type has been a good way to provide personal care, but then do it in bulk, do it in mass, and do it at scale.
Mhm. No, I like that thought. I feel like we have actually was tossing around ideas of like cohorts this morning, but I kind of got kicked back pretty immediately with they're like, but we have so many different use cases because people can use our software in so many different ways. And so I don't know if you all have like thoughts on that in particular, because I feel like that is something that pretty repeatedly happens where people are just using it in different ways. And so they're like, but we still have to, and we do have to individualize it. But I think for that end user training, in my opinion, where I was coming from is anything is better than nothing. And so, at least giving people an opportunity to see how it works at a basic level. And then, the administrators can come on top of that and say, okay, well, this is how we're using it. But the nothing approach isn't working. So I was trying to just think of another approach.
Yeah, a helpful lens that one of the guys on my team, Mark Lees, brought up. He's one of the other guys that's an onboarding manager on our team. He said there's a really common concept like time to value, right? We've all heard that. That's kind of the aha moment that we're trying to bring all our clients to. But one element that he introduced that I think helped to reframe that conversation was, what is your time to first value? And so I think instead of trying to say, how can we get the client everything that they possibly purchased, what is sort of that bread and butter experience that we're trying to get those end users? And then we can, of course, add on top of it. Like, how much can we teach them, like to your point, Nicole, enough of the basics to make them dangerous, essentially ask better questions, because once they're familiar with the software, I would imagine that if you have an end user who's in it, they're all bought in, they love it, and then they ask you a question, it's probably even enjoyable to answer that question, right? Because you're like, oh, you're in the system, you know what's going on, and you're having more of this strategy sort of conversation versus like, how do I add and edit my profile name or something like that, right? So I feel like there's an opportunity where instead of maybe your leadership hearing like, oh no, we can't do that because there's so many different use cases, it's like, yeah, guys, but really what we're trying to do is just get them to a base level of competency, like, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, how do we get them through their basic, like kind of like boot camp courses that everybody and anybody using our software is going to need to know. So at least when they come into the conversations with us and are asking questions, they're better questions and they're more informed, and we can be a little bit more precise about how we would give that. Additionally, for anybody who's just needs boot camp, that's one less email that you receive, Nicole, or that's one less chat that, Elon's team has to receive as a support team, right? So I think there is an element of like, what is that minimally viable amount of information that a new end user needs to know, regardless of use case, regardless of persona, that we can start to like scale, right? Because once you had that foundation, that then becomes possibly the bedrock that you can then build persona specific, right? Training or materials around. But I feel like that's the part where I've seen a lot of organizations, ones that I've been a part of, they just totally get overwhelmed with the idea of creating some sort of like training by persona, because you just kind of start spiraling, because you're like, well, then we could use for this user, and then we could use for this user, right? Like, what is that baseline training that would be applicable for all of those users, and how do we keep adding to that list, making sure again it's viable, and then noticing where does it really take off in really unique use cases after that point.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree. I love that thought. And I think there's a lot of like time to first value. I've been reading Onboarding Matters, and that's in there and that's talked about very heavily. And I think that that's a really good point. Um, and something we've been talking about because we've kind of been doing a book club around it. And I think that that's hard too. I've noticed that a lot of times that's something that's hard to establish. But like you mentioned, we have better conversations when folks know what they're talking about. And I can always tell who's done some background digging or played in it a little bit based on what they come in and they start kind of talking about. So I think that's a really good point, and I'm going to keep kind of pushing it.
Yeah, I think it is an important topic. And Elon, what you had mentioned before about having in-person things or even having an established like conference, I feel like this change management thing is such a prolific problem or issue across all onboarding teams that I feel like it's something that's worthwhile, like either having a guest speaker about or some like workshops or something like that, because I feel like this is where a lot of people hit the wall when it comes to onboarding. Either they've gone through this, like Nicole's situation, right? She's been onboarding them. She knows their use case. She knows what's going to be best for them. And then she has to hand them off to a CSM who then has a pool of 300 other clients that they're trying to work with, right? So how could you possibly understand the individual nature of each of those accounts? So I feel like there is an element here where as sort of the cutting edge of the onboarding industry, like I think that'd be a really good one to be able to broach and really try to figure out more comprehensively, because it does seem like it's a problem where you might design, build the house, but nobody's actually living in it. And then it's just like a vacant property, a vacant software solution.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll definitely do a lot more diving into that topic for sure. Cause I feel like you said, it's so rampant. I don't think anyone really has an answer. We all have our ideas but those ideas might not, like when executed, might not work across the board. But one thing you mentioned earlier that I wanted to comment on was establishing that baseline. While it might be hard to put people together in a cohort because they use the product or service differently, I imagine going back, like meeting up with your marketing team and dialing in like, hey, what is the pain point that we solve? What are you selling people? What are you saying? If you can get to the root of that, like that becomes your baseline. Like, and then you can share your best practices. This is how the best customers that we have are solving this pain point. Now, then you train off that. And when you're training off that, that becomes a standard. And then everyone else, they might have different approaches. They might have different ways of doing things because of internal processes and whatnot. But that is like, for example, I'm over the support team. Like I've watched all their training videos on Intercom, and that's a tool we use. And a lot of their best practices don't apply to us because our approach is so different. But after meeting with other people and getting connected with them and seeing how they do things, I've seen our internal processes evolve to become closer aligned to those best practices. And so that does take time. There is that element, and I love the idea of cohorts because there is that element of keeping up with the Joneses. Like, oh man, this company over there is doing it. Why can't I do it? And
right.
So there's that peer pressure, and I think it's a positive thing.
I also think bridging the gap between like seeing somebody who's kind of gotten there or maybe is incrementally ahead of you, I think it's such a powerful dynamic, right? Because it's one thing to say, wow, they're doing everything right, versus like we're incrementally getting better with these other people. And like maybe they're just a couple steps ahead. And really that's all you're asking of them is to make those first couple steps and then in the right direction. Because I think that's the one thing about those case studies and stuff like that. Like, oh yeah, could I read a couple like white papers about how you're successful with other clients? Like, oh, you dropped the value by 40% or time to value or whatever it might be. I think those are really inspiration and helpful. But the next question anybody asks is, but what about me? What about my team? What about my organization, right? And I think that's the unique thing that like cohorts can capture, that at least that element. And I feel like there's something there that is like the X factor, right? Because you see people who go through boot camp, right? That sometimes becomes their lifelong friends after that, right? It's like, because like we went through something hard together, and we incrementally got better every single day together, whatever that might look like. So I feel like there is that social element of, I know where I want to be, I know where I was sold, but how do I get there as an individual? And I think that's one thing that's really exciting about working with onboarding managers. Like, it's not lost on me that we use our tool and onboarding software to onboard other onboarding managers. So it's just fun to be able to work with other people who are in a similar stage, similar cycle, experiencing similar challenges. And at least for me, like, I was running into a point in my career where I was working on software solutions that were like e-commerce solutions or LMS solutions, stuff like that, that didn't really intersect my day-to-day. But now that I'm working in a space where I basically am working on software that solves my own problems, like, it's just exponentially increased my job satisfaction and my desire to help my customers, because helping my customers are like helping myself in a way, because it's like we're all trying to solve this one big problem. So I feel like that cohort dynamic could be really essentially trying to capture a slice of that for different community members, especially if they themselves are not necessarily the end users or the end beneficiaries of their own software.
I like
Uh,
that.
One thing I wanted, okay, let's take a step back from cohorts and let's imagine that that's not an option. What do we have left? Like, what other strategies could we implement? It sounds like, just looking at the comments on the on the question of the week, gamification's a big one. How do we gamify that experience? Is there a way, like, I think of all these like weight loss apps that you see on Instagram and wherever, like, the more fun it is, the more motivated you are. If you think of Duolingo, like, their whole thing, like, yeah, it's easy to set up an account, it's easy to get implemented, but then learning a new language or solving that problem of not knowing Spanish, like, that's really hard to do, and you have to change a lot of behaviors to be able to learn that language. I think Duolingo does an excellent job of gamifying it and reeling you back in, staying at the forefront of your mind, by saying, hey, let's get on a hot streak. Let's do 10, 15 days in a row of learning Spanish. How can we emulate that in a nonprofit like sector, or if we're working with librarians? I don't know. I'm just trying to think of anything at this point. But yeah, what are ways we can gamify it and kind of show progress to the user to help motivate them to keep coming back?
Yeah.
I'm very interested to hear y'all's thoughts.
Say that again, sorry.
I said I'm very interested to hear y'all's thoughts on this, because I would agree. I think that's a very cool tool. I use it with my daughter actually, in learning like her 50 states. She's really excited when she gets like a 10 out of 10, you know, like it's a cool tool. So I've never really fully considered that, but I would love to hear like y'all's thoughts on how that's implemented.
Yeah. I don't know, Nicole, if you play a lot of video games, but the whole idea of like gamification makes a lot of sense. It drives a lot of people's behavior within like mobile games and stuff like that. Like, oh, just one more hour, then if you play, then you'll unlock this next achievement. I feel like a lot of that stuff, because it's so like B2C and you experience that within your non-professional life, that it would make sense to try to transition that into like a professional setting, just because we've seen how effective it is with just individual end users, which essentially, like, creating a really highly engaging, highly used mobile app is a lot of the same sort of experience we're trying to drive within our own applications, right? But it's just for a business end instead of like a personal end or something like that. So honestly, like, Elon, when you talk about like what can we do today, especially around gamification, I think it all comes down to like, what sort of behavior are you trying to see within your application, and can you actually register and like report on that, right? So if our goal is to mark 10 tasks done, are we able to, by user, be able to track that activity, like the first 10 tasks that they've ever marked done? And if we can we build something in either through an email automation or a recipe, or even in the application to then notify up to that individual that they've done something or congratulate them. So I feel like it's really mastering your own data and then connecting that data with the desired behavior that you want to see within the application. Because it could be like running a tax report or, setting up a billing profile, whatever it might be. And so I think it's like it's a both and, where you have to see what data is currently available that you can set up some sort of automation or gamification around. But it's also having that conversation at the leadership level to say, hey guys, it's one thing to sell somebody, it's one thing to like get it set up, but it's another conversation we need to have to actually get people engaged in using it. And gamification is a way to empower that. And what gamification means for our organization is X, Y, and Z, right? We want to see, and the beauty of it too is that, like, Nicole, if you talk to any product management team on your side or any other organization, they already have these KPIs set up, right? Whenever they go about actually building out a new business feature or a new part of the software, they have to make like I'm a product ambassador here at GuideTX, so I'm learning some of the ins and outs of a product manager. But you basically have to say, if we invest this time, if we invest this money, it has to basically deliver this amount of new revenue. It has to attract this amount of new clients. It has to drive this level of engagement. So I think it could be a really cool avenue to say, hey, I'm on the onboarding team and I'm literally using the application day in, day out. Let me collaborate with the product team to say, what were those original KPIs that you set out to achieve? And how can we make that more visible and tie that to end use cases within our application? Because ultimately they're trying to measure and see it, which they may already be doing. And now we can just surface and tap into that to say, all right, we may be seeing that organizationally, but can we go like a layer deeper and look at the end user, like per user? Is that possible to tap into? And if it is, and they already have that data available, then how do we surface that data back up into the application? Or how do we generate an email from that? Or like a coupon or whatever it's going to be, right? Because at the end of the day, SaaS solutions eat a lot of the cost for traditional software solutioning because you anticipate a long-term relationship with them, right? So I think in that same vein, just as like, I don't know if you guys charge for your onboarding or implementations, a lot of companies do or don't. It's like, this is another opportunity to say, we need to make another investment in that same sort of spirit that we did when we ate the cost for the implementation, to say, how do we reward end users once they reach or achieve certain behavior we're trying to track against within our own applications? So yeah, just as kind of like kind of connecting two worlds here between product and onboarding, is a lot of the behavior you want to see in your app are probably behavior that the product team that's either set out originally when they even proposed any new software solutions. But it's also that they probably have access to the data that might help drive that drive that gamification experience.
I love that. And we actually do have access to see what people are doing. So we kind of immediately, we actually have usage set up as something like we internally check and measure already. So figuring out how to gamify it, I actually feel like would be easier. That, I mean, we're already one step towards it. I feel like not necessarily super easy, but we're like a step towards it already. So
right,
that's a really good idea.
Essentially you checking it, like you, Nicole, logging in to the back end, wherever it is, looking at the data and then saying, this is good or this is bad. You could make some sort of software solution, say, if it reaches this threshold, do this. If it's below this certain threshold, do this, right? That's literally just like a CRM, like customer health report. That's all they do, right? They say, this is a dashboard to then plug into the back end for your software. And then we'll create a client health score out of that, out of the whatever you set as the criteria. So I feel like, yeah, that'd be such a great avenue, especially if you already have access to it, to say, hey, let's invest a little bit of time here and energy to see how we can start to actually like leverage the data that's coming through versus just say, oh yeah, I have 40 clients that I have to check, and every day I go in and check each of their things. Like that sounds like a perfect automation opportunity.
Yeah, I think it's all about just measuring where they've been and where they're going, show a trend line, get it in front of their face. Because yeah, that's kind of what like Duolingo does, or like weight loss apps. Like you see where you've been and see how you're trending, and like that's super encouraging. It really kind of sets that in stone, like that behavior of, oh man, I got to keep coming back because I'm literally seeing myself get better. Or as I implemented this tool, like I can see my day. I downloaded this app the other day. It's a Chrome extension. It's called Magical, and you can essentially create any sort of text template. So if you write the same emails a lot, you can create a trigger, which is like colon meeting recap or something, and it will populate with some blank fields for you to fill out. And every time I use it, after like 5 times, it said you've saved 3 hours or whatever. And like that right there, I was like, oh dang, I gotta keep using this because it's literally saving me time.
Mhm.
So I love, yeah. And if you're capturing that data already, it's just finding a way to package it up and present it to your customers or your end users and making it easy for them to see the journey they've been on and how they're getting better. So love that.
Sweet.
We are coming up on time. Do you guys have any other comments or questions or things you want to share before we tune out? I could speak English.
I'm good on my side.
Me as well. Thank you. I feel like this has been great. I'm kind of coming away with, it's funny. I'm hearing my daughter and they're playing one of her games actually right now and getting excited about it. So I'm like this, I think it could be just a really good tool and something we could probably easily implement while we're working towards other solutions. So this
Absolutely.
was great. Thank you all.
Thank you, Nicole. And it was a pleasure to meet you. Thanks so much for joining and contributing. Yeah, we're always happy whenever someone joins the live stream itself. Because we also do it on LinkedIn and we get a lot more people on that side. But yeah, we love connecting with real people in the community. So thank you so much. And then just as a sign off, I'll upload this episode to the question of the week thread. So feel free to follow along there. And then let's see, next week. Oh yeah, there's one thing I forgot to mention. So the month of September, we're going to be diving into customer engagement. So how do we keep a customer engaged throughout the onboarding, whether you have a 1 week or a 7-month onboarding process? Like there are challenges and competing priorities, kind of like what Matthew mentioned earlier. If they don't have time for it, they're not going to make time for it. So we need to make sure we're getting on their calendar that we're a #1 priority. And so throughout the month of September, all the questions of the week will relate to customer engagement, and all the live streams cover the question. Dive in. But yeah, next week we'll talk about what does good customer onboarding look like according to customers. So we're going to take off our onboarding hat and put on our customer hat, and we'll start thinking from the perspective of a customer. So stay
Awesome.
tuned. We'll cover that next week. But yeah, thank you again, everyone, so much for joining, and we'll see you next week.
Awesome. Take care, guys.
Bye.
Thank you all. Bye.